Have you ever heard of the story of Jericho? It's a place where people marched around a wall once a day for 6 days, and then on the seventh day, 7 times, and the wall fell down flat. And so today we're going to learn how that happened. Now this story comes from the book of Joshua, chapter 6. If you're following along, let's jump right into it. Now get ready for this because it's a pretty crazy story. Jericho was a strongly fortified city. All right. Now, the first thing we need to understand is that Jericho was one seriously fortified city. Verse 1 says, "See, I have delivered Jericho into your hand, the king thereof and all his people, his land. You shall do to it, and to it you shall do as I commanded Moses, so you shall dispossess the cities before the Israelites." Now notice here that verse says that Jericho was delivered into their hands. In other words, God had already given them the victory. But why would God give them a victory in advance if the city looked so impenetrable? Well, it did look like there was no way into this city. Their massive walls were super tall, surrounded the city all the way around, and were tightly shut. The gates were bolted and barred. In fact, it seemed almost impossible for anyone to come in or go out. So this is the situation that the Israelites faced. They needed to take the city of Jericho, but it was surrounded by these huge walls and the only entrance seemed to be blocked off, so they couldn't come in or go out. And so what were they supposed to do? Well, God had a plan, but it wasn't a normal battle plan. God gave Joshua an unusual battle plan. In verses 3 through 5 it says, "Arise, go up to Jericho, you and all Israel with armed men before the city, and I will give it into your hand. But as for you, on the day when you shall do this, take 12,000 men from among all the people. You shall have each man his weapons, and they shall march around the city a whole year, once around the city in a circuit. And you shall do this 6 days, and on the 7th day they shall rest. But the one who circles the city shall do it 7 times. This means 7 circuits around the entire city. Then afterward, shout with a loud shout, and the wall of the city may fall down flat. And the people shall go up, every man straight ahead, and you shall take the city." Now, what's going on here? What is God doing? He tells Joshua to lead 12,000 men and women from the camp to march around the city once a day. Now, don't ask me how big the city walls were, but at the end of the 7th day, they would circle the city a total of 7 times. And if you've been counting along with me, that means that they walked around the city a total of 42 times, right? Once times 6 plus 7 times 7 equal 42 times. Now that is quite a long way, especially for someone who's walking in circles. So, yeah, that is a lot of walking. But God said that on the 7th time around, they would shout and the walls would fall down flat. So was God telling them to play a game or what? Let's keep reading. The Ark of the Covenant led the procession. Now, in verse 6, we see that the Israelites began the march. It says, "So Joshua called the 12 tribes, and they set out toward Jericho. And it came about when they marched around the city, they kept silent, the ark of the Lord going before them." Now, notice here that the ark led the way, and the priests carrying the ark were followed by 7 priests blowing ram's horn trumpets. Now, in case you don't know, the Ark of the Covenant was kind of like a little portable throne where God's presence would dwell. And it was super heavy, covered in gold, and it was basically like a treasure chest, but made to be carried. And whenever they marched, the priests carried it, and they blew the trumpets with the priests leading the way. The people knew to follow after the ark, and they also knew to stay silent. Verse 8 says, "And it came about on the 2nd day, when they had marched around the city, circling it, that they shouted, 'Shout for the Lord, O Israel!' And it came about when the trumpet sounded and the people shouted, that the wall shook. And likewise, on the 3rd day, they marched around the city, circling it and shouted, 'Shout for the Lord, O Israel!' And it came about when the trumpet sounded and the people shouted, that the wall shook again." Now for 6 days the Israelites kept marching around the city once per day, shouting and praising God and waiting. Now, during these 6 days, the Bible says that they were silent, except for the sound of the trumpets. So imagine this scene. You're walking in total silence, except for the sound of trumpets being blown over and over and over again, and that's all you hear, is the sound of the trumpets. That would be kind of crazy. So they do that for 6 days, but on the 7th day, God changes things. Verse 15 says, "Then it came about on the 7th day that they rose early, just as the trumpet sounded. And they marched around the city in a circuit, the whole multitude a total of 7 times. And it came about when they had finished making the circuit that the priests blew the trumpets. And it came about as the trumpet sounded that Joshua said to all the people, 'Shout, for the Lord has given the city into our hand. And shout you shall shout, and the wall shall collapse.' Now this is it. This is the moment that they've been waiting for, and the priests blow a long blast on the trumpets. The trumpets blew, and the people shouted." Verse 20 says, "Then the people shouted, and as the people shouted, the wall collapsed. And the people rushed in, each man straight ahead, and took the city. Now, the walls, which had stood strong for so long, suddenly came tumbling down. The city was theirs." Now Joshua 6:21 says, "So the children of Israel utterly destroyed all that was in the city, both man and beast, and they looted the city. Now they took everything that they could get their hands on." And this would have been considered looting, except God told them to take everything. So hey, I guess that makes it okay. Now, not everyone in the city was killed. Verse 22 says, "But Rahab the Canaanite, who had taken the 2 spies, she and her household were saved alive. And she went out to them, and they gave her a token, and she spared her life." Now Rahab, you might remember, was the woman who helped the Israelite spies enter Jericho and hide from the king. And Joshua had promised her that if she did this, she would be spared when the city is taken. And that's exactly what happened. So her and her household survived. The victory proved obedience brings God's power. Joshua 6:27 says, "And Joshua saved Rahab the Canaanite, her parents, her brothers, all who belonged to her, and all who were her household. And they all lived in the midst of Israel in the land of Canaan, to this day a tribe of Israel." Now Rahab and her family didn't just live to tell the tale, but they actually got to live in the land of Canaan. That's pretty awesome. So the Israelites won a great victory over their enemies, the Canaanites, and the city of Jericho. And this victory proved that faith and obedience are more important than strength or strategy. Okay? God promised to give them the victory, and He honored His word. Even though the odds were stacked against them and the city seemed impenetrable, God showed them that when He is in charge, all things are possible. All right. Well, that's it for today. I hope that you enjoyed this retelling of the Fall of Jericho. Now, if you'd like to watch another video about a Bible story, then check out this video right here about David and Goliath. All right? I'll see you next time.